All right.
I might pass them on to someone else.
But you're the person to start with.
Ms. Young, how are you this evening?
I'm very fine, thank you, sir. I apologize for being delayed. Delaying.
Well, you're not delaying yet.
Got about 45 more seconds.
Yeah. Just under the wire.
Trouble, I'm always in trouble.
Let's keep moving her tonight, don't we? To hear from. It's done.
Shocking.
You know, Susan, you set yourself up
Really?
for that.
Gosh, that's so surprising.
But wouldn't you rather that I do my homework than just, you do all this work and nobody reads it?
No, I appreciate everyone reading.
Are we ready to go?
I am ready when you are.
Good evening, it's 7 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Abby, would you take the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Human.
Close, Hoyman.
Hoyman, thank you. Commissioner Wagner.
Here.
Commissioner Steeler.
Here.
Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Stender.
Here.
Chair Gerard.
Here. We're asked if you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair is looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented or with changes.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. It's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda considerations. It's one item on it, approve the minutes from the regular meeting of June 11th, 2025.
I'll move that we approve the meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I have one minor correction to the minutes. On the adjournment, we have Commissioner Langness seconding the motion. He's been off the commission for a while. I honestly don't know who seconded.
I am fairly certain it was Commissioner Young, right?
I think so.
All right. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Since I can't read what's written in front of me, I missed the open forum. We ask if anyone would like to speak to any issue tonight, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, spend a couple minutes giving us your thoughts on whatever you would like to discuss. Once we have heard from everyone, we will move on to the next item. I will tell you that every regular agenda item on 7, the septic, the solar array, and the cannabis products, they all have public hearings. You also have an opportunity at that time to comment on that. So would anyone wish to speak at this time at the open forum? Since we see no one moving forward, we'll close the open forum, and we will move on to item 7A, the public hearing, a variance to allow for a septic system at 10200 223rd Street North, Midwest Sewer Services, and John McPhillips, resolution number 06-25-25-01. I don't know what the PZ is, but PZ 25-1324. What is that, Debbie?
That is just a tracking number in our internal system. We started using them as a reference number for when we're sending out hearing notices. So that way when someone calls up, we kind of can track them with their case if they're with different staff. We probably don't need to include it on our agendas, but that is at least just the kind of case file number in our offices.
All yours. Abby.
Excellent. Well, as Chair Gerard mentioned, thank you, John and Nancy, I'm going to probably butcher their last name, but Colucci, recently purchased property at 10200 223rd Street North. This is an unsewered area of the city. They, at the time of inspection, Washington County, or excuse me, at the time of sale, Washington County does require septic inspections, and it was determined that their septic system did need to be replaced. This is a pretty common thing for commissioners that haven't been on the Planning Commission for a while. We have a lot of unsewered area in Forest Lake, and those septic systems do need to be replaced in time. Sean McPhillis of Midwest Sewer Services has applied for 2 variances to 75-foot wetland setbacks for the new septic system. Up on the screen in front of you, or up high or in front of the commission right now, everything that's yellow on the aerial image is wetland. Those are national wetland data, not surveyed wetland data. And so just, we always know as a staff, when we see a wetland, a yellow blob, it's bigger than it actually shows up on here. The property was delineated, and it was determined that a septic system a replacement system can go onto the property, but cannot go anywhere where it is not within a 75-foot wetland setback. So therefore, 2 variances are being requested, one from 11 feet from the wetland to the north and 10 feet from the wetland to the south. So be put in the middle of those 2, trying to minimize those wetland setback encroachments as much as possible. So when we're looking at variances, we look to see if what they're looking to do is reasonable, that there's some sort of uniqueness to the property. It's not created by the landowner. It's not just a want. There's maybe a genuine need. There's no harm to the public, and just kind of overall, does it fit with the spirit and the intent of the zoning code and the comprehensive plan? So in taking a look at this one, and as noted in the staff report, the variances requested represent the smallest possible wetland setback encroachments that could be achieved on the site while still being able to have a compliant septic system. The hardship arises from kind of those unique site-specific conditions in the 2 wetlands that are there, the proximity of the home to those wetlands, and just that high dry land where a septic system is going to be able to be achieved. And then replacing the failing system with a better design, newer design, it's going to yield better environmental benefits, which is going to have a public benefit in the long run. So staff does note in the report that we do recommend you approve this variance on the basis that it does conform to city code requirements for the issuance of a variance. And if the Planning Commission is favorable, they can move to approve Planning Commission Resolution 06252501. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
I just had one question. You made the comment at the very beginning that the national delineation, that you always kind of assume that the actual is larger than what is shown there. That is a surprise to me. I know in other parts of the country it sometimes can be smaller than what is shown.
Well, Forest Lake's wet.
Yeah, I know that.
It's just, we have found, at least more frequently than not,
Good to
that
know.
the national wetland data is smaller than the actual on-the-ground conditions.
It's good to know.
Any other questions of staff? Hearing none, Abby, is the applicant here? Joe?
I don't believe that the applicant is here. They did reach out to us, both Nathan and I, this morning. Given the nature of the request, the limited impacts, the uniquenesses and meeting the conditions, we didn't necessarily feel they had to be here. We always tell applicants that it's their right to come or not come. And so they chose to not come this evening.
That's fine. You know, usually that's at this point, if they want to say anything additional. This is a public hearing. We ask if you wish to speak to this issue, come up to the microphone, state your name and address. for the record, and then spend a couple of minutes giving us your thoughts on this application. Once we have heard from everyone who wishes to speak, we will close the public hearing. It will come back to the commission for a decision. So with that, we'll open the public hearing at 7:09 PM. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? I'll ask one more time. Does anyone wish to speak to this application on the septic system? Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public hearing at 7:10 PM. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Chair, I would make a motion that we follow the staff recommendation and approve Resolution 06252501.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
And the resolution includes all of the staff recommendations, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Planning Commission is the final, unless someone wishes to contest our decision. They have 7 days to contact the city and let them know. There is a fee associated with that, but if they wish to contest the decision, it will then be handled by the city council. So with that, we will move on to item 7B, public hearing, a variance and conditional use permit to allow for solar array at 886 North Shore Drive, Faith Lutheran Church. And there's 2 different PZ numbers. We're going to have 3 things here. We have a variance for allowable area. That's resolution number 06-25-2502. Conditional use permit to allow for a ground-mounted solar energy system, resolution number 06-25-25-03. And a site plan review, resolution number 07-14-25, and we don't have -XX at this time. It's a recommendation only. The Planning Commission, we will be the final decision on steps 1 and 2. They will be separate motions, and then we will also need a third motion for the site plan review. So with that, Abby, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair Gerard, members of the commission. Faith Lutheran Church owns property at 886 North Shore Drive. They've requested a series of applications to install a ground-mounted solar energy system on their property in the single-family residential zoning district. So for commissioners that might not be aware, the city doesn't have a zoning district for institutional uses. Those institutional uses just kind of live in our underlying zoning districts, so our residential districts often by conditional use permit, which means, hey, yeah, you can have this non-residential use there, but we're gonna wanna put conditions on it. Faith Lutheran Church has an underlying conditional use permit and then comes back before the city when they want to make amendments to that conditional use permit. So the request tonight before you is for that conditional use permit for that ground-mounted solar energy system. We allow for ground-mounted solar energy systems in our single-family residential zoning district, but we cap them at 200 square feet. The intent for this was to kind of encourage those solar systems to be roof-mounted, and that we weren't taking up land necessarily in our single-family districts for larger kind of solar array systems. Faith Lutheran Church is part of their older conditional use permit, did have an area just to the west of the church. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this overhead aerial that is being used for some outdoor and then open space. Additionally, as part of past expansion plans, Faith Lutheran Church had to show this portion of the area to be used for future parking needs. So should their past expansions ever necessitate more parking or create a parking problem in the neighborhood, they showed us that they could achieve additional parking in that western area. Those use permits and the expansion of the site are long past. We've determined that that additional parking would not be needed. And so asking for this conditional use permit amendment for this array in this location would not be in conflict necessarily with that past need for possible future parking. Does that make sense so far to everyone? The tricky part, as I mentioned, is we only allow 200 square feet, and they are looking at a solar array system that's over 30,000 square feet. So this is a fairly large system that would be able to help offset the church's energy needs on the site. As a result, they would need to have a variance approved by the Planning Commission. So tonight before you, again, is that conditional use permit and that variance request. In review of this from a staff perspective, looking at all of our commenters that we review, the only comment internally was that they were really kind of staying out of that right-of-way and easement area associated with the roadway that runs behind the church. Beyond that, there was no concerns from a city staff, watershed district viewpoints. The church did hold a neighborhood meeting regarding both of these applications on June 12th. 7 members of the public were there. They did discuss that with our interim planning staff, members of Faith Lutheran Church. It doesn't sound like there were concerns necessarily that were asked to be represented in this meeting, and additionally, we did not receive any public comment prior to this meeting. So again, with variances, we look to see that what they're doing is reasonable, there's some sort of uniqueness to the property, and there's not going to hurt the public, be harmful to the public in any sort of way. This is where it somewhat gets a little tricky because the question of whether or not a 30,000 square foot ground-mounted system, when we would only allow for 200, is reasonable, and whether or not there were other reasonable alternatives. So early on in the process, we did talk with Faith Lutheran about why not roof-mounted in this area. As you look at the roof system and the complex as a whole for Faith Lutheran Church, you can see that the church has been designed with a lot of different roof peaks and angles. Now, those roof peaks and angles, because of just sunlight moving overhead, do at different times limit the actual absorption of those panels on a roof line, where a ground-mounted system that's unobstructed by buildings, trees, those sorts of things, have full day, all sun access. So they did look at other reasonable alternatives. They also determined that the investment that they would make for the smaller sized rooftop array wasn't necessarily going to help offset those energy uses the same way that the ground mounted system can. Now, that being said, additionally, what we also learned is Faith Lutheran Church has a geothermal system underneath the solar mounted array that they're proposing. So the land area that had been determined for potential future parking, should we need it, actually has another energy system below it. This would only help complement and offset their energy systems even more. So that kind of touches on the uniqueness of the property. The other factor too is that this area isn't necessarily being used for any sort of land use for the church. They don't have adjacent neighbors through there necessarily that could, share a land use. This isn't on a developed roadway where this is land that could ever be developed for another type of land use complementary to the church itself. And then lastly, we did look at things like landscaping, lighting, security, signage. Some of those things as part of the use permit aren't really relevant here, but the church is proposing landscaping associated with this to help kind of block some of the visual nature of the array to the properties to the south. So overall, staff's assessment is that this isn't going to be any sort of public detriment. It would actually probably help the church and then also just the local energy needs if they don't use all of the energy in the future. Generally speaking, it conforms to kind of the spirit intent of the code. Now, I can see Commissioner Young looking at me, and I think one of the reasons that the city has very strong solar, ground-mounted solar restrictions was that we did not want to see land uses, land areas kind of being, I wanted to use the word gobbled up, but gobbled up by lesser productive land uses. We're an urban community and we see that, solar farms all around us. And this was one of the ways that I think the city wanted to limit that. We also didn't necessarily want to see every single one of our residential properties just being filled with solar panels. This is definitely a unique site, which warrants kind of that conversation about the uniqueness and how reasonable this is in this area. There are 2 resolutions in front of you tonight. You have take action on the conditional use permit and the variance request. Every conditional use permit needs a site plan approval. Unfortunately, our code is a little tricky in that when there is an amended site plan, those go to the council. So tonight before you is consideration of Resolution 06252502 approving a variance, and then 06252503 approving a conditional use permit, then also that council resolution for recommendation. Staff's recommendation is that the project does generally conform to the city code standards, and we would recommend approval of those 2 resolutions as well as recommendation of the site plan approval to the council. Representatives of the church are here tonight. If you have questions for them. Do you have questions for me?
Questions of staff? I have 2, but I always
Great.
try to let everybody go first. In Fate's narrative, they talk about having a 7-foot fence. I believe in the residential, we're only allowed 6.
We do allow for greater than 6 by conditional use permit. If I missed our analysis of that in this, that can be added to the conditional use permit of consideration tonight.
My other one on the CUP is when this needs to be removed, when it's defunct, they need to be responsible to remove it. There's nothing in the CUP that states that.
It's wholly on their property. So are you?
Whether they remove it or not, we don't care.
Well,
When it's outlived its useful life.
Yeah.
sure. I guess I do think that that is something that could be considered substantially proportionate to the request. However, we wouldn't necessarily do that for any other type of man-made improvement that's outlived its useful life. I think that that's definitely something that the commission can consider. It's just not something that we would condition. It's a newer condition that I would say I don't recall us ever imposing.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff? Hearing none, the applicant is here today. Would they like to add anything to what the city staff has presented?
I do have a couple of questions for y'all, with your permission, sir.
Well, is there someone speaking for Faith tonight, this evening? We don't bite.
My name is Jennifer Tolzman, and I live at 756 North Shore Drive, and part of our house is right on 8th Avenue Northeast, so it faces, for 41 years, I've walked through the alley to church every morning, or on Sunday mornings, and Wednesday nights and everything else, so I'm right there. I'm a neighbor. I was serving as the council president at the time that we began our first exploration about solar and what can we do. I've been a member through the geothermal stuff. I've been involved with talking with the other neighbors who, all of them specifically who are on Northeast 8th that butt up right against the area where that would be. So, and at church, we've done church meetings, I walked and talked with all of those neighbors personally, with the pastor and everything. So we've been upfront about everything since our first discussion about all of that. And we're trying to be good stewards of our finances for our energy use, but also for the earth. And that's why the geothermal project went in some years ago. So I don't know if I can answer your specific questions, but if I can't, Daniel or K-Del can, so.
Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
Yeah. You stated in here what your typical yearly use, 341,000 kilowatt hours is your yearly use. And I looked and looked and looked to see how many kilowatt hours this particular system is going to generate per year, an estimate. And I couldn't find that. I did find some estimates online, but they vary so much by manufacturer. Usually we try and have our variances be as small a variance as possible. This one is 132 times what our limits are. That's a lot. And one of my questions is, since, when we look at our variances, they have to be not just for an economic gain. And so making sure that this is the smallest system that would meet your solar needs. And this is a very large system, and why it needs to be that large.
And I'm going to, is there, Daniel, you want to address that? Daniel can come up he is our finance guy and at church. So I'll let him tell you, and he also lives here in town too, so.
My name is Daniel Deemer. I live at 8588 215th Street North, and I'm the finance manager at Faith, and I've been a member there for 18 years or so. So we started looking into this maybe 10 years ago. Roof mount was the only option at the time, and it was not feasible. So with the law the way it is, I think a year and a half ago, it became acceptable for nonprofits to get a direct tax incentive from the federal government rather than as a tax credit. So you just get a check as a nonprofit. So that's when we really started looking at this as an option. We spend $4,000 a month on electricity. The size of the system is roughly 300,000 kilowatt hours annually. So we really can't put enough solar panels on our property to fully offset our use unless it's a particularly sunny year. We use about twice as much gas, natural gas in a year as an average home, and about 30 times as much electricity. The geothermal system uses a lot of electricity. So from an environmental perspective, it's been great. We have not burned tons of natural gas over the last 20 years that the geothermal system has been in, but electric rates have gone up a lot since then. We've done a lot of work over the last 10 years reducing our energy use. I think it was 2012 or 13, we used 520,000 kilowatt hours. Our staff has done a great job throughout the years of doing any and every project we can to limit our use, and we're kind of at the limit of what we can do, which is why we really started looking at this. And just the fence thing, I am pretty sure it's a 6-foot fence in the application as well. So I don't know how 7 got in there.
Oh, I believe you. It will be a 6-foot fence?
That's the intent, yeah.
Otherwise, you'd be back here for another variance.
There's no reason for the extra foot. We're just trying to keep out deer.
Other questions, Susan?
That'll do it for now.
Other commissioners?
Chair, can I just
No,
ask one quick question of the treasurer? Did you say that right now you're using 3,000 kilowatts?
320, 24,000?
Your high end in your letter was 341,000
41.
kilowatt hours per year.
And then the system was going to be
300,000.
300,000, okay.
So if it's a particularly sunny year, we might hit 100% of our annual electric usage, but we tried to size it, you know, as,
To offset that,
Yeah.
to balance.
the
Okay.
intent is to balance, not to produce anything more than we need. But yeah, it's much,
Thank you.
much bigger than the 200 square foot.
So, unrelated to that, that you have proof of parking, 60-some spots are being eliminated that you may be required for later, and I'm fine with that. We all know that churches, for the most part, are not growing in size, or it's very modest at best. My question has to do with a couple years back, and I don't know if it's 3, 4, you were here with trying to put some housing for veterans on
Tiny houses.
this northeast corner of your property, which would have taken some of the parking. Where does that sit?
It's not happening. There's not enough support. in the
That's a solid
congregation.
answer. I mean, I'm fine wherever it sits, but I'm more concerned about the parking
Yeah.
than where that project sits. But if that's dead in the water, as they say, happier.
Even with the recent legislative change?
Yeah, there's no push at Faith for tiny houses at our property. We have several members of our church that were part of that group that are pushing hard to help other churches to be able to host a sacred settlement if they would like one, but we're not pursuing one.
Other questions of the applicant? Here, thank you very much. We may have questions after the public hearing, although it doesn't look like a rousing crowd for the public hearing, but we'll see.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. We ask if you'd like to speak to this application on any of the 3 items, the variance, the conditional use permit, or the site plan. Please come up and state your name and address for the record. Spend a couple minutes giving your thoughts on this application. Once we have heard from all parties, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for further discussion and decisions. So with that, we'll open the public hearing at 7:31 p.m. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? I believe, Abby, you said beginning, there was nothing to read in on this one either.
Nope.
Play the Jeopardy tune here. I'll ask one more time. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Seeing no one come forth, we will close the public hearing at 7:32 p.m. Commissioners, further discussion before we do any motions. I remind you, we'll be doing 3 motions, one for the variance, one for the CUP, and one for the site plan review. The Planning Commission has the final say on the first 2, and the third one will be a recommendation to City Council. So discussion, concerns?
I've got some philosophical concerns about this. And it's more about the variance. As we look at how we decide on variances, one thing is this a landowner created issue? And if it's just a landowner created issue, and it's not like the septic system we looked at earlier, there's just, you gotta have a septic system and there's nowhere else to go. This is entirely owner created. They're making their own problem in a way.
The hardship.
Yeah,
Rule is not.
there's no hardship here. We say that, you know, a straight economic condition is not grounds for a variance. We work really hard with applicants to say, what is the smallest variance? You know, the one before us, it was, okay, 10 feet on either side. This is 132 times, 163 times what we would normally be allowed. And I'm a fan of solar generation. I am a fan, those of you that know me know I work hard on environmental issues. And it is just the fact that as other folks look at how we are evaluating this variance, I can see folks making very strong arguments that, well, you let them have this large variance and it was something of their own making and it was not something that was unique to the property and it was a strictly economic decision. And so that's where I'm really hung up, is on the variance side. I think that they're doing.
Just on the principle of
Yeah,
the.
and how it will affect us when people come in the future looking for variances, and looking for some sort of similar or congruent permission that's
Is
way
there
beyond our boundaries.
Different mechanism we can use other than a variance in something like this?
The only other opportunity, and we did discuss through this with the church, was changing the code to allow for something like an institutional use exception, essentially. With that, there's pros and cons to every application. There's ways that the application can be perfect for the site, but you look at the next institutional use and you say, oh man, we didn't mean for that, right? Look at other institutional properties within the city, other churches that have excess land. Would you still want that size of this thing in those locations? That's the only other option available. And I will say we talked through this with the church and staff directed them in this way because of the potential negative implications of a wholesale code amendment. I can understand Commissioner Young's concerns completely. And the only thing that I would say is that each case is reviewed in their own uniquenesses, which sometimes I understand is a harder case to make later when someone says, yeah, but what about them? The uniqueness here is, yes, it is a large sized array feature tucked back in a residential neighborhood along an on-ramp to a highway. That was about the only reason that I would say staff could argue that this could not fit with the neighborhood. It wasn't a detriment in some way to the public.
Over time, Paul and I have been here a long time, and precedent has a way of coming up to bite you sometimes. It has bitten us hard in the past. And that's my only concern with this project, is, I would be in support of the conditional use. I'd be, site plan, I have no issues with that. I like the fact that you're doing an underplanting with natives and pollinators, and take a look at some of the state grant programs for your plantings, Blue Thumb and things like that. And you have an active Washington County Master Gardener group that is specifically tasked with pollinators and butterflies and things that would be of great assistance to you and might even find ways to help with your planting.
As well as the Watershed District and Washington County Conservation District, if you hadn't reached out to both of them. I will just note that the conditional use permit and site plan amendment are only needed for the ground mountain array system. So should the commission move to deny the variance request, but approve the conditional use permit, you are in essence authorizing that use. And so it's kind of, they run hand in hand. It's an all or nothing. I don't mean to say it like that, but you know what I mean? You can't necessarily approve one and then deny the other. Because I think inadvertently it could be argued that if you approved the use permit, you are thereby approving the use of that size of a solar system on that property, inadvertently approving the variance. I don't know if that makes sense. Our newest commissioner over there is looking at me thinking, man, this is you talking in circles, but.
Commissioners, any other comments?
Yeah, I have one. This isn't going to bankrupt the church, is it? I mean, is there a separate fund set aside just for this, or does this come out of the general fund for the church?
Yeah, so if all rebates and credits and whatnot are approved, this would save the church about $2,000 a month. If none of the federal or state programs are approved, it's pretty much a wash. Just the regular $4,000 a month electric payment instead goes to the loan for this project.
Good? Thank you. And Abby, to make sure that I get this correct, the only reason we're seeing this for variance is because it's in the single-family residential?
Yes, most urban residential districts wouldn't allow that size of a ground-mounted solar. So if, again, even if this was 30,000 square feet on their rooftops, you wouldn't have seen it. It's the ground-mounted nature in excess of 200 square feet.
And
That
they-
size, I believe, if I remember correctly, increases based on the size of the property. So even at 200, that's still like one of the largest sizes you could have in our residential districts, because these are laws designed for residential properties, not necessarily for a church property.
Which is why we didn't need a variance out at the hockey arena when the school district put that array that's in the industrial.
The rooftop? Or is it
Didn't
ground
they put-
mounted?
Didn't they do ground also?
I'd have to look. I would,
Who asked our hockey coach here? It's not on the ground?
I don't think that there is. I didn't think there was a ground-mounted system out there. But that being said, it could be because that, yes, that is an industrial district, and we maybe allow for a greater allowance of those ground-mounted systems in our non-residential districts. Any way around it. I wasn't here when we adopted our solar regulations. I'm not gonna presume there's anyone up there right now that was here, but I can look at them and say that our solar ordinances really were designed to reduce ground-mounted systems within the community. I think we did not want to see land getting, I think my words earlier were gobbled up with this type of land use.
And you're gonna define that technical term?
Sorry. So
And
unprofessional.
the 200, that was pretty much, at the time, would handle the needs of one house. That's 200 square feet typically for a house.
A 10 by 20 space in your backyard. You could have put it in your back setback area, probably wouldn't have impeded on your neighbors, those sorts of things.
Comments, discussion? My personal opinion, although I'm with Commissioner Young, that this is a large amount. Doing the quick math, this also, if the church wasn't here and they were developing it, they would have at least 22 homes on this area without a CUP, so they'd have at least 4,400 square feet, so now it's only 8 times. So we're getting right down, it's not near as bad anymore, you know? I personally,
22 homes on this?
it's almost
It's a pretty
400,000 square feet.
You
So
could
it's
have gotten
almost-
more than,
It's like 8 acres.
yeah, I mean, you could, if you look at up on the screen here, here's
An apartment
just
building.
what, 8 homes here, there's you probably could have gotten 32 homes on there.
So,
28 homes, so by 28 by 200, what's your good math there, Susan?
I'm sorry, it's late.
all right, so my point being that, you know, if there were houses here, we'd be able to allow more. They already have a limited amount they can do with this. The other option is for them to have a parking lot there. So do we want more ground covered with parking or solar array? And solar array, at least it goes into the ground. So, you know, it's a lot, but I personally don't have a problem with it. And probably get bit someday, but that's my opinion. One person's. Other comments, concerns, opinions?
Could they, as an option, put the solar arrays above the parking lot?
I don't think that changes the variance though, right?
Yeah, your variance would still be there.
Violating the square
Still have
footage.
the open green space though.
And essentially, they will have a significant amount of permeable area because the ground mount doesn't take up a lot of ground square footage. They'll maintain the permeable area, and if they follow through with the plantings, there'll be a green environmental benefit there. I get all those things. That's not where my issue lies.
Other comments?
It just, we're not meeting what we say are our rules on when to grant or not grant a variance, and so that's. But I'm not gonna throw myself in front of the bulldozer either.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 06-25-25-02 for the approval of variance request to allow ground-mounted solar panels in the front yard of the property located at 866 North Shore Drive. And there's more with that, along with the 3 conditions that the staff, or 4 conditions that the staff recommends. I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain, please.
Abstentions?
Abstain.
We have 1,
4 in favor.
4,
402.
yes.
So motion passes with the.
Motion passes. Chair is looking for a motion for the conditional use permit request. I'm on a roll. I'll recommend approval of the amended conditional use permit, Resolution 06-25-25-03. Allows for the approval of the conditional use permit for Faith Lutheran Evangelical Church, subject to the following conditions, and there are 12 conditions. I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
Like I have to abstain because I did before, but it's kind of a different issue. I'll still abstain because it won't matter.
All right, so we have a 5-0-1. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we recommend to the City Council approval of the site plan, resolution number 07-14-25, et cetera,
Along with the
With the-
12 attachments.
with the attachments and conditions.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
1 abstention, so 5-0-1, motion carries. So tonight, Planning Commission approved your variance and your conditional use permit. That will go into effect in 7 days unless someone comes forth and wants to disagree with the disagree with the Planning Commission's decision. If they they need to inform the city within 7 days. And regarding the site plan review, that is, the final will come to the city council and they will approve it. And that will be on
July 14th.
July 14th's agenda. Thank you all for coming this evening.
Best wishes with your project.
We'll move to item 7C, a public hearing for an interim use permit to allow for the sale of cannabis products at 508 Lake Street South, Lakeview Leaf LLC, resolution number 07-14-25-XX. It's a recommendation only for us. So, Abby, are you presenting?
I am, thank you. So some of the members of the commission may remember that within the last year, the city adopted new provisions for retail or adult cannabis use within the city of Forest Lake to align with the state statutes that followed thereafter. Essentially, the city's ordinances allow for different types of cannabis businesses within the city, but not all types of businesses in all types of districts. And generally speaking, many of them are only allowed by interim use permit. So an interim use permit is very similar to a conditional use permit. You just saw a conditional use permit amendment before you tonight. The interim use permit is, it's a use that's allowed. We have rights to put conditions on it, but we're gonna put a time frame on it. And the reason that we did that with our cannabis-based businesses is we have a hunch the state might want to change their laws within the next few years. Just looking at law trends of cannabis-based businesses in other states and then this state. So our ordinance allows for retail sales of cannabis by interim use permit in the MU2 zoning district. So that's our mixed use 2 zoning district, kind of that Highway 61 corridor. And an application has been made for Beeswax Dispensary to be located at a portion of 508 Lake Street South. And so a couple of things that we first look at when we get an inquiry for a cannabis-based business, and I will let you know that we have had dozens of inquiries for cannabis-based businesses within the city, not just retail use, but everything from growing, manufacturing, processing, the whole gamut. So, but this is our first application of this nature. The first thing that we look at is to see if they are within or any of our buffer distance requirements. So as a reminder, the city has imposed buffers from other types of cannabis-based businesses because we did not want to see a high concentration of these businesses or kind of a row of businesses necessarily, or any neighborhood that would be concentrated with these businesses. Also buffers from schools, parks, daycares, and treatment facilities, residential treatment facilities. This property is not located with any of the buffer areas. Then the next thing that we look to is that use is allowed. This is a retail cannabis in an area that allows for retail and allows for that retail cannabis. Only about 3,200 square feet of the property is being proposed of the existing building, and that would be located kind of in the southern portion of the building. From the exterior of the building on Highway 61, you wouldn't even notice any changes to the building. Be separate entrance that's existing coming into the south of the building completely. Because this is being located in an existing structure, there's no setback changes, no changes to parking because we're just swapping one type of retail for another type of retail. There's no changes to the landscaping. The applicants did propose a security plan, lighting plan, and odor mitigation plans. So our police chief has taken a look at security plans, found them to be sufficient. Odor mitigation is they're just gonna put in a new rooftop unit specifically for that retail space. It actually, if I remember correctly, forgive me, it's been a little while since they've kind of started the application process, but that isn't even a requirement of the state because everything that they will have in this facility will be prepackaged items, and in theory, you just don't have that odor issues like you do where you are growing, processing, manufacturing cannabis-based. So generally with our use permits, we're really looking to see, does it conform with the comp plan, the zoning code? Where else does it fit, right? That's what we were looking, you just kind of went through one. Yes, it had a variance attached to it, this does not, but generally you look to see if, does it fit where it's being proposed? We're just swapping out one type of flower for another. Didn't mean to actually kind of say it like that, but it's retail sales, and other than it being adult use cannabis there, and which it's meeting all of our city code requirements for, staff does not find this to be any sort of an issue. With interim use permits, you actually don't have outright authority to approve them like you do with conditional use permits because of our interim nature and because we want just that extra little security on them. You make recommendation to the council. Tonight, for your consideration is recommendation to the council, which staff would recommend. You recommend, how many times could I say recommend? That you recommend approval to the city council. There is a draft resolution in your packet that will be forwarded to the city council if the planning commission so makes that recommendation. July 4th, 2025, that it does have July 14th, 2025. Does
I
have
was going to be impressed.
12 conditions. There's a lot of dates. There's a lot of stuff up in here. I don't know how I just thought replacing flower for flower, but they probably thought of that long before now. Anyways, there's 12 conditions in that draft resolution. Any questions? Applicants are here. If you guys have any questions, it is a public hearing.
Commissioners, questions for staff?
Yeah, I got a question. Do they have to take it off site to use the cannabis? I mean, do they have like a little cafe inside there where they can light up inside the store or?
Yep, it is only retail sales. And so if, maybe now that we're getting applications, I could also, on one of our upcoming meetings, just kind of go through what were the uses we determined where, but this is not an on-site consumption facility. I believe if I remember right, the only places we had indicated we would allow for on-site potential consumption would be in our downtown area and then potentially in our ag areas as accessory uses. But I will bring all that back before the commission or follow up with a separate email for folks.
Does that include the parking lots too?
Yes. And the state of Minnesota does also have some standards regarding adult use cannabis in public places. Generally speaking, your home, your property is allowed, but once you start to get outdoors in ways, it gets kind of defined differently. The city also does have a law that does prohibit the use of cannabis in public parks. So just know that there are some other local and state level regulations in place that all that would be allowed to be used here is the sale, or excuse me, used is not. The only land use allowed for your consideration tonight is the actual just point sale of a product to a patron, consumer.
Abby, do you know what meeting that Amanda presented the ordinance? Because that would be online, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is that there was like, we were there and there was probably 10 or 12 different classifications for what we're allowing, and it tells you what's allowed in each one. And I would say out of the 5 of us that were there, 3 of us were still confused at the end of that meeting. So, I mean, there's a lot of splitting hairs on this, so if we can find that date for
Yeah.
you, it's worth watching it, because Amanda's a city attorney, and she presented the whole, here's what the state's requiring, the whole 9 yards.
I will follow up. I've got a note here too. I should have done a little bit more refresher, and I apologize. It's easy for me to be like, hey guys, it's allowed. Click the checkbox, let's move on. But to just do a little bit of a much more education, I'll follow up at least with an email with some resources of here is your zoning map, here are the uses that are allowed in which zoning districts, and then find those links to past discussions.
I think you're entirely right that the rules are going to change like crazy. And talking with a couple of other cities, they're seeing that too. I'm wondering why, Abby, you want to go with a 5-year instead of the 1 year? Because I would really hate to have them sort of caught between a rock and a hard place if, with state rules changing, and then they say, but our city permit. So and
Honestly,
we've always talked about 1 year, and that seems reasonable to me, and would allow for things to happen with state changes.
So the thing that I would say about 1 year is 1 year sometimes just is not enough. By the time they finalize their permitting requirements with the state, they get in with building code requirements. It could be that this business is not actually operational for another 3 to 6 months. So there we've just eaten half of the IUP. Additionally, the review of use permits, especially in a short-staffed environment, just cannot be guaranteed in 1 year. I would say if the commission is not favorable to the 5-year, and pulling it back, maybe 3. But I would rather sit with a legal nonconformity for a little bit longer than have to run through this process unnecessarily in another year.
We've got several other interim use areas that I can think of, and essentially, unless there's a reason to go in and look at it, we've either had complaints or the folks are coming to us and asking for some changes because of something that happened. We've just pretty much set it aside, but the ability to review every year is there.
I think you can always write that in as a condition of approval. The city has the right potentially to review each year. I don't think our code necessarily allows for that. I can double check. And forgive me, Commissioner Young, in some ways, I'm still a young staff here, I'm still a new staff here 3 years in. We have not processed an interim use permit together. So if there has been a city history of 1 year permits, you haven't done that in the last
I
few
don't
years.
think there is, because,
Binco,
pardon me?
Binco.
Yeah, but that was really, I'm thinking of the church where
Yeah.
Mike's Discount Foods, those are 5-year ones. I don't have any problem with the 5-year, but. Other questions, Susan?
Not for staff.
Other questions for staff? Abby, where do we sit from a state standpoint? They haven't awarded any, like, permits or?
They have, yep. So the state had done so the state has, forgive me, I will not get this right because I don't know that anybody can necessarily. The state has 2 different types of licenses. We have social equity applicants, and then we have other non-social equity applicants. And you can only have as many non-social equity licenses as you have total social equity licenses, if I remember correctly. And the social equity licenses were issued first, and then there was a lottery for all other comparables. So if you had 5 in one bucket, you can have 5 in the other, but in the 5 bucket of non-social equity, there are probably hundreds. And out of those, only those 5 get them by lottery. After that lottery occurred just a few weeks ago, a month ago, I don't even know what time is right now, the state issued all of its licenses that it could issue to date. So we do have.
They have a license? Or they
Well,
can apply
they
for it?
have the pre-authorization to obtain their city zoning permissions. And then once they're done with the city's zoning and licensing, then they can go back and finalize their license with the state. So with this new application, we did also learn just on some requirements that the city staff will be asking for up front. We want that pre-authorization just up front. We're just not even gonna start monkeying around with the applications until we see that somebody's got legitimately gone through the state, because if they've gone through their state processes to date, they're gonna have everything that they just handed to us, and then we process it through you folks, so.
Other questions to staff? Hearing none right now. Does the applicant wish to add anything? We have questions for the applicant? We have questions, so who is speaking for the applicant this evening? Please come up, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Michael Donnelly. I live in Bethel, 24133 Taylor Street.
Susan, you have questions?
Yeah. The location is home to a couple of businesses and, you know, the flowers and the gifts and the apparel, et cetera, and the coffee shop, the bakery.
Correct.
How are you going to segregate? And right now, it's very free-flowing. People come, part of the 9 o'clock beautification group thing.
Yeah.
So I tend to watch it. How are you going to make sure that you're segregating your cannabis sales and it's not?
I understand. So
You know where I'm going with
yeah,
that.
for sure. It's being partitioned off. So you won't have any access from any other part of the building except for, so there's construction gonna, assuming everything goes through for the construction, it'll be its own piece on the side of the building. And the idea was to have it on the side of the building so that it would kind of, this inlet is for these customers. And even if you asked, we could mark the parking spaces as well, that it's for that use. So it's kind of, it's not on the main strip of the road as well.
And your business hours for this are much different than for any of the rest of the facilities. So folks won't be able to, say, mess with your flowering and gift areas.
No, it's
outside.
totally separate. It
Okay.
will, from the outside or even from the inside, you won't even, it's a different compartment of the building altogether.
I didn't really get that from,
Sorry, there's gonna be a partitioned wall that will split the floral shop. The main entrance that you have there right now is gonna be part of the floral shop. The other entrance will only give you access to the dispensary itself.
okay,
It's the only entrance and you can't, it's getting a division wall put up, so it won't be the same space at all.
okay.
So Susan, for reference, this is their kind of cooler display and their counter. Everything I kind of think of in the little bit more gift section than clothing
Yeah.
and floral section will be split off, including the stairwells up to the mezzanine area.
Yes,
will
correct.
then-
Okay.
Yep.
So in your drawing, the area to the left of the green is where your sales are going to be, your cannabis sales.
That's
left,
right, that's
yep.
behind the counter, so the green that you see there, that would be point of sale. Those are the countertops from an aerial view, looking down on
Okay.
the floor map. Blue is along the wall where the floral shop is, but that will be where all of the products will be displayed.
Okay,
And there will be there's a security desk as well, right at the
Yeah, I-
entrance, ID-ing everybody. So no one's allowed in the space unless it goes through the state verification system, which is also integrated into the POS system as well.
okay. That, all right, I was worried about the hours of the operation and segregating and then
For sure.
the entrances. And interior building traffic, not commingling.
Correct, that will never happen.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got one. So in other words, that ID system, so no one named McLovin will be able to
Correct.
access it?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Yep, when
thanks.
you come in, so we're using there's two big regulatory systems that are known throughout the United States. One of them is metric, so you can track the product from seed to sale. So no matter when it was created, you'll know exactly where it is in the state and if it's been sold or what store it's sitting on and what shelf it's on. Along with that is Dutchie, which is a huge company that integrates with Metric, which allows for ID reading, and they integrate into the state database. So it has to be a verified state ID that gets scanned, and they won't even be allowed on the showroom floor until it gets verified. And it'll put them into the system, and then it'll also, that same system will show what the product actually, what the consumer bought as well. All the way from the seed, we can trace it back all the way to where it was created in Minnesota.
Having been in dispensaries in Colorado and, let's say, some other state, I'm used to a fortress to get in You have just one single door. I'm used, usually when you go in, you're stopped because there's another door. You see the security, the armed guard standing there.
Yep.
They badge you like you're gonna do, and then and only then can they move into the space. Is there a reason you don't have the fortress or?
It wasn't a requirement by the state. I like that. One of the things for those doors, they will have mag locks on them. So the security guard will actually have to hit a foot pedal or a buzz in order for the doors to be unlocked for each consumer. And that was one of their, I want to say they're 1,200-pound mag locks. And so the framing of the door will come off before the door actually gets busted through. That's one of the bigger requirements that we've been seeing, and it's been kind of the standard I've seen across the board for everybody that's going through regulatory right now. I've came across one dead man door, I think that's what they call that, where you have to scan into one room, get ID'd, and then scanned into the next room. And I've seen that at one location so far, and I've seen a lot of these for Minnesota already. This has been
I'm fine.
kinda
If the police chief's fine with it, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I just, since it's a cash operation, there's just a lot of action going on, and,
Yeah.
your employees need to be safe. And I'm sure the police chief has worked this out, but that's my concern.
Through the chair, are there any security measures between the new dispensary and the adjoining space? So if you were to have a security issue inside of this tenant space, is there any carryover or crossover that could affect general public in the space next
There will
door?
be only one access door, I think, on the second floor that will even connect the two. So they would have to go through a wall on the lower level. It will be, you can't tell it from this drawing because of how it's laid out. I essentially made the mezzanine area up top. This, I tried to show you the actual floor. We only have the downstairs on that side, and you have to go up the stairs to get to any of the other rooms, and you're cut off from the rest of the room. You'd have to go through a wall to get into the other spaces.
Are there any security features to the walls that are getting built? I mean, is this a concrete wall or is it just a standard 3 and 5
It'll be a standard, I believe, yeah.
framed steel drywall?
Yeah, correct.
Other questions? Absolutely. Thank
There's
you.
a lot of security, the security portion on the state level is the toughest and most rigorous portion of the regulations. And all of those have to be met before we can get issued a license from the state as well at the final walkthrough.
When are you hoping to open your doors?
Depends on this, and then also build out. Build out could take up to 60 days, so maybe in about 3 months here. It would be really nice. That also is falling on the fact that we need to make sure the state is up to standards right now. They haven't, they're not quite ready yet. I know they still have to implement the metric system that I was telling you about from seed to sale. And then there's a whole portion of not only just getting the space ready and conditioned and to put together for it, but then do we have products ready to go? And so that's another obstacle we're dealing with.
Thank you. We may have more questions for you later.
Is that everything?
Well, for now.
Okay, thank you.
This is a public hearing. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak to this application, please step up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Spend a couple minutes giving you your thoughts. Once everyone has been heard, we will close the public hearing and bring it back for further discussion and a decision from the Planning Commission. So with that, we'll open a public hearing at 8:12 p.m. Anyone wish to speak to this application? Abby, is there anything to be read into the record tonight?
Nope.
You? I'll ask again, does anyone wish to speak to this application? Seeing no one come forward and nothing to be read in, we'll close the public hearing at 8:13 p.m. Commissioners, discussion, motions, what would you like to do?
So what is it that we are specifically approving tonight with this?
We're recommending
Or recommending
the
tonight?
city council either approve or deny.
Yeah,
You
Okay.
make the recommendation on the approval or denial of the interim use permit for retail cannabis sales at 508 Lake Street South.
Okay, so in the discussion, I remember you saying that security is the most rigorous aspect from the state, and there's a reason for that. And I guess what I want to understand is why we would want to move forward with this at this point in time and be a guinea pig out there when there's going to be, I mean, right now, we know the state is still changing and changing and changing. And why would we want to go down this road right now? That's just, I want to put that out there to the others, see what the thoughts are.
I'm going to answer for Abby, and with your permission, that we have a business that wants to take advantage of being one of the first in the state. There's a competitive advantage there, and, you know, they've requested that the city grant them a license. So it's not so much that the city is putting itself out there as there is a business that is interested in starting that business here and gaining, you know, whatever competitive advantage there is to being one of the first.
I would just add to that we have local regulations and state regulations that allow for the use. And so our job is just to make sure that there's reasonable conditions on that use and the appropriate timeframe for that. But generally speaking, if a project conforms to the code, the use is allowed in the district, we have very little grounds for denial.
That triangle thing, that, you know, that our levels of authority.
Other discussion, commissioners? Chair is looking for a motion.
Are there thoughts on the commission about 5 years versus a slightly shorter time?
I would like to see a shorter time.
What would you like to see?
I'd like to see 1 year, but apparently that doesn't work so well. So what would you be in favor of, Susan?
I can understand the staff concerns with 1 year. Because this is new, because we don't know how it's going to be working, because the state's still working this out, I'd like to see 2 or 3 years review at the longest. And if everything's cooking along, we don't even have to, it doesn't have to be a formal administrative review. It's just that we retain the opportunity to review if there are issues that come up.
I mean, I would prefer to, but if again, if I don't want to hold up I don't want to hold things up.
So I just want to clarify for the record, our interim use permits actually they expire on the date.
Yep.
They have the right to come in and ask for those extensions. So it's not we review them, it's a date certain, it's done. And so my only, hesitation in 1 year is, as I mentioned, that doesn't give them much time. They still have maybe a month or so to work through things with the state and a few months of build out. We're already getting halfway through their interim use permit. Additionally, the code does also indicate you can ask for those extensions, but it sounds like you really can only ask for those extensions for 2 additional time periods of 1 year. So the way the code really reads is our IUPs really should only be allowed for 3 years. Forgive me for not kind of really fine-toothing through that right now. I would say that the 3 years, we definitely are going to see what's going to have happened with the state. But by then, I think that we may have changed our regulations too that would require it to be a conditional use permit or even outright permitted by that point.
We've done an IUP and they've been up for review, but they've been for more than a year after the first term. I know the church was either 5 or 10 additional. But that's just the first I've heard of a 1 year, so we might want to research a little tighter.
That may have been something they did specifically for the cannabis. Yes,
So
I was
this-
to all those meetings, but I've slept since then, and
I mean, granted, I will fully admit, again, have not been here going through our interim use permit, but I can't necessarily say with the greatest certainty that all prior staff followed all of our regulations to a black and white T. I'm just reading black and white law right now, and I think that we could even change that by the time their interim use permit. In our next meeting, we're going to talk about some of our application processes and procedures for just this sort of thing. There's some nuances that we really need to kind of fix in our code.
I have no problem bringing it down to 3 years. My personal opinion is it'll take that long for the state to make another decision. 1 year, the state won't even know it's approved it yet. I mean, they just move at snail's pace, and then it's rapid fire. And then we need to give the applicants time to respond to the changes.
Then, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to the city council approval of resolution number 07-14-25 regarding, pardon me, the 07-14-25 regarding the permit to allow for sale of Canada's products with the change that it be for a 3-year instead of 5-year period as, review period as originally drafted.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. Discussion on the motion? Susan, where is it that it's 5 years versus 3? I'm reading it here, and I'm
Yeah,
looking to see which one we need to change, or is
Yes,
this an
I
additional?
saw it where it was in there. See, I don't have a printer at home, so I can't do all the cool yellow.
It's condition number 2 that the IUP is valid upon approval by the council and remain in effect until July 14th, 2030. So, well, I can note in just the staff memo and verbal presentation to the council that the recommendation is to pull that back a couple of years, so.
2028?
2028.
Right.
So it would read, condition number 2 of the resolution is that the IUP be valid upon approval by the City of Forest Lake City Council and shall remain in effect until July 14, 2028, except with the continued exceptions.
Discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. So this will go before the city council on July 14th.
Correct.
They will make the final decision on this, but good luck on your project. Hope you're successful. We'll move on to item 8, discussion of a concept plan review for Bittersweet Division. They have the PIN number there, and Jaron Johnson Development LLC. Typically, Abby, the applicant is here. Are we having this item?
So this item is, yes, I would say that we still can have this item. It just provides non-binding feedback. The developer is not here. I did not hear if there was any reason to not be here. I will say the City Planning Commission did review a concept and provide comments on this concept, on a similar concept plan on this parcel prior to my time here, but within the last 5 years. So the developer had initially, it didn't come before the Planning Commission?
I don't believe so.
Well, there's been, it's not far from my house here, and it's.
That's fine. I just know that
I
staff.
don't recall this coming before us.
Okay,
It
I
may
just know,
have been intended, but I think it might have been pulled. But
that could be. I know that staff has reviewed it within the last 5+ years. So I mean, there's no requirements in our code that developers have to be present, developers, applicants have to be present. So I would say the idea to just get this in front of folks, see what we're thinking, provide some of those non-binding feedback. Remember at the last meeting, you had 2 different concept plans. Concept plans just are high level, what are we thinking here? So I'll run through it fairly quickly. This is a part of kind of a phased development of Bittersweet. This would actually be Bittersweet potentially 4. I couldn't find 3 in our past records, but we found it eventually. Bittersweet 4 by Jaron Johnson Development being proposed to be located in the single-family zoning district. What is being proposed is 20 single-family detached lots that each of them are about 1/2 of an acre, accessed off of Hilo Avenue. I'm going to flip back really quick from the actual site plan here just to get a little bit further out to kind of show folks that Hilo Avenue is coming up already from Henna. You've kind of got this long dead-end road, but this is pretty typical in kind of those areas on the fringe of development, where development is hitting that urban-rural interface. This is one of those areas. What this actually really is between the property that it's coming off of, or the Hilo Avenue that it's coming off of, and this property really is the now gateway to some pretty large undeveloped agricultural parcels in the northeast corner of the city. These are the last remaining parcels then that would connect up to 235th Street North. So we're looking at urban development in a traditionally rural area, and those are always a little tricky. And what also is a little tricky is we don't necessarily think about this kind of development in that kind of northeast area. We've always been kind of focused on that southern area of the city. So looking at this, it is just under 16 acres. There is some wetland, woodland, and steep slopes that would probably bring down some of that developable acreage. The land use plan does call for single family, so it's consistent with the single family zoning district, but that minimum density is required minimum density is 1.5 units per acre. Right now, they're at like 1.43. Once we take out some woodlands, some steep slopes, some wetlands, potential areas for trails, those land areas could get closer, those developable acreage, minimum dwelling units per acre. Thank you, Susan, for just nodding and knowing. 1.5 units.
Where are you going?
We could get there, but it's still pretty early. It's not an area that's in need of any parkland dedication. It is right next to Cooling Camp Park. I did already mention that kind of street length and the connections into the property just to the north. They are showing an off-street trail on the south side of the road that would connect to Cooling Camp Park from the north. What staff is proposing and is not outlined in your staff report is that we would change that from a trail to a sidewalk on the north side of the road. And that north side sidewalk would come up each of the proposed street A and B for that pedestrian connectivity, eventually to lead us all the way up to 235th. Again, we're starting to lead into a more urbanized neighborhood further up there, even though they're a little bit larger lot. That sidewalk that we'd like to see on that north side, we would carry all the way to the cul-de-sac. That isn't as common, but the reason is we'd like still a trail connection to Cooling Camp, but we'd like it between lots 12 and 13 for connectivity, not only to those properties to the north, because we are going to want trail connectivity from 235th coming down into Cooling Camp, but also because the grades in this area are really steep, where they level out quite a bit in the northwest corner of Cooling Camp. So for reference, the proposal right now would be the trail would come in through this kind of woodland area, very steep woody area. We'd rather see it coming up through here, so it's tying into this larger parcel and coming down on less steep slopes into Cooling Camp. That was not outlined in the staff report, but that was disclosed to the developer before tonight's meeting. There would be the consideration of a variance needed for that cul-de-sac length. Now, as a reminder, we're kind of adding a cul-de-sac on the end of an already long dead-end road. But this is an area that, again, these sorts of variances are more acceptable because we know that it's leading to greater connectivity in the future. This isn't the end of the road, even though it's the end of the road right now. There are other aspects of the development that we'll still have to work through during the plating process, stormwater, landscaping, tree preservation, but tonight, up for your discussion is just some preliminary, non-binding feedback on what you think of the Bittersweet concept plan.
Is it going to be water and sewer?
There is not water in this neighborhood, no.
Yes, we would like it, though. Oh, did that come out of my mouth?
There is, I do believe, sewer up there. I do also think that as we start to talk about future land uses associated with the 2050 plan and our urban service areas, I do believe that in the next few years, there will be conversation about water in these areas someday. What that looks like, I don't know.
The problem is punching all those wells in that area and those homeowners understanding the concept of wellhead protection, et cetera, et cetera. When you're talking sidewalk, how wide a sidewalk are you talking? Because one of the things that a lot of folks have tried to push is a trail system across that northern side. And there have been several designs that have been submitted to the city. And to me, if you've got a 3-foot sidewalk that, now that I have to walk sidewalks in another subdivision on a regular basis, you can't put 2 people side by side and a dog, and actually on a standard sidewalk.
I think our city standard for a sidewalk is 5 feet. I'd have to check our engineering standards. What they're showing is a 10-foot trail. This is not an area we'd want to be putting in a trail because it does not lead. So I'm gonna bounce back out. There is no pedestrian connectivity anywhere in this area. So as there have been conversations about the potential of pedestrian improvements along North Shore, still hasn't been determined if that's going to be possible. The whole goal and a lot of the conversations have been, at a minimum, trying to see if we can get those pedestrian connections and off-street pedestrian connections along 235th to come in down to get into Cooling Camp and then eventually potentially lead to the south and the east, linking back up along the north side of the lake later down the road.
Does the owner of Bittersweet have control over the properties to the north?
No.
Because to me, saying someday, 20 or 30 years from now, there might be a subdivision up there. Hilo is a small road, it is a long road, and then you're adding on another long road. It's the only way in, it's the only way out, and I'm getting to the length that I'm concerned about public safety with Hilo being a long way and being a dead end with no way of getting there to the north. And then we've got another cul-de-sac that's going to be a long cul-de-sac that maybe in 20 or 30, I mean, it's not, if they don't even have any control or agreements on that property to the north, we can't say with any certainty that that will develop. So if we're commenting on concept, that's getting to the length where I'm starting to get really uncomfortable from a safety perspective.
Other comments? I will comment, as long as we have this one up here. All of the housing, I'll call it southwest of there, that's all sewered, but if you see where Imperial Avenue is there, that's all on septic. So that's where the dividing line is. And then all the North Shore is Seward because of the lake. That I can tell you. So my, now I lost. So Abby, my question for you, for the developers, he's got two streets, Street A and Street B, going to the north. And it looks like Street A is probably 400 feet from Hilo. Why are we looking for why is the developer possibly looking for two exits out here? So on the left here, you've got Hilo, correct? And then you got Street A. There's one house on Hilo, and then you got two more lots, and then you got a street, then you got two lots, and you got another street. Just seems like a lot of exits out of,
I think one of the things that, I'm gonna try to get to the right property here, that from a kind of an urban design and urban services, when you can create a more traditional grid pattern in your development, you can provide more efficient services and generally get more lots into a land area versus when you are kind of spreading your properties out a little bit more. When you have right now the Lot A, so you've got two houses, a Lot A, two houses, a Lot B, you're gonna be able to have your kind of
back to back.
yeah, you have
I gotcha.
the post-war design, if that makes sense. And really, when it comes down to it, from a municipal perspective, it's a lot more efficient when you're running your utilities, when you're plowing your streets, when you're kind of maintaining that infrastructure over time in those historically traditional grid pattern systems.
Thank you. I had not thought of that angle. Other comments on this development? We will not see it again until it's a preliminary plat. So if you have any concerns or any comments for the developer at all, now's the time, because they're really unhappy. Tell them later that we really wanted this. Susan?
So Abby, are you saying you're not going for any park dedication?
Pardon?
Because you're not going for any park dedication because if this area is going to be also using cooling camp, that's putting a big burden on cooling camp that is already, that's pretty much volunteer maintained for a lot of the things that go on at Cooling Camp Park. And so are you not?
I'm not saying that the city wouldn't be seeking any park dedication. It's just that we
Or
may
dollars.
not be seeking land
Okay.
dedication.
All right.
So a reminder, or for new commissioners, our laws do require every new subdivision provide land as dedication for parks. But we don't necessarily in here want to see a 1.5 acre park, especially when it borders cooling camps. So we do have it written into law that we can accept fee in lieu of land. And that may be the option that is pursued here. This will need to go to our new Parks and Recreation Commission. We have a number of concept plans that we'll have to get in front of them soon, and so we will get their opinion. But staff's recommendation is we do not accept land. We do try to seek fee in lieu of land dedication.
And those fees just go into the general park for development, but they don't go towards the development of cooling camp.
They go into the park fund and they are earmarked as dedication dollars. Dedication dollars can only be used to improve and enhance upon systems.
Capital.
It can't go to maintain systems. So we can't use the land dedication dollars for this to regrade and bring in a bunch of new sand for the ball fields out there. Sorry if you got a ball field kid in the room, parent in the room. But we could use them to do things like replace and upgrade the playground equipment out there, or to add in additional amenities into the park that aren't currently there.
Yeah, but
They are not earmarked though for
for
cooling
cooling
camp.
camp.
They go to the 10-year capital plan, which tries to disperse the funding through the community. But it has been a very low fund, and it has not been seeded for many years by general fund dollars. So there are a lot of parkland needs in the community.
Well, and those ball fields always need some, because this is the old
Always.
wastewater.
I've heard those baseball fields just are always in need.
And the city charges every kid that plays on a team.
The city does not charge every kid that plays on a team. The city has agreements with users that goes to help offset the expenses in our parkland system, but generally those go for maintenance costs, not
Maintenance. O&M.
capital costs.
Thank you for
But we
clarifying.
generally charge the parent organization, which really in a lot of circumstances right now is the athletic association. Now, if the athletic association charges every child, I can't say that for sure.
Other comments on the development?
Pass through.
I got the question. Are they going to get rid of any of the trees?
I do imagine that there will be some tree removal. You can just see where it's lined out with things like the roadway coming in. There will need to there would probably be some proposed for grading and home removal along the eastern and southern portions of the site. Our code does allow for tree removal for land development up to certain thresholds. If they propose to exceed the thresholds, then we do also have tree mitigation fees that can be paid, that then goes very similarly again into a line in our park capital fund that then goes to help reforest areas of the community. But to quickly answer your question, yes, there will be some tree loss. We don't know the extent at this time, but
They're going to have to do an inventory, correct?
yep. So what I'm hearing overall is, generally speaking, another 20-lot, single-family residential subdivision in Forest Lake is welcomed, but in this area where this helo is the only in and out, there is some concern for that public safety, and it may be that this property is not right for development if the properties to the north aren't also developing or there's a controlling interest. I don't I will share that with the developer. It would, like as we mentioned in the staff report, it would require a variance from the city to be able to allow for this. And I'm hearing at least that there might not be favorability from all commissioners for granting a variance in this
So
area.
when we reviewed the one last week with the long cul-de-sac, one of the reasons I was in favor of it is there's water there for the fire department. And out here, you have to truck everything in.
Right,
And that gets a little dicey back here.
yep.
So that is a concern that I would have, is just getting trucks in and out, fire trucks. So I would like to make sure we have comment from the fire chief on that with this length and
Sure.
how. You know, because there was a fire not far from me long ago, and we had about 5 departments over there, and it was on North Shore, so just trying to get the trucks in and out of there was something else.
And that area, I mean, it's farmland and it's brush fire prone. I mean, it just is. And getting to that with only one way in and the same way out, I realize it's a chicken and the egg thing, that someday it will develop, but I would feel much more comfortable even if they had where that road, where one of those roads are, if they were to have at least a gravel access easement out to 135th.
That's a great option. We can definitely share that with them.
Something so that you could escape.
Any further comments?
How close is water to this?
Any
water on lake?
They come back to town.
Yeah.
It's ironic, you know, we got a 2,700 acre lake and we can't pump out of there. So they come all the way, I don't know where they actually,
I'll look. So the,
Hydrant is probably off of, by the apartment building.
I would think by the city water distribution right over by Mallards would probably be where they'd have. We have hydrants out to
Apartment building, that's it.
the apartment building, right? Yeah.
we have sewer because we've piped under the lake. But water wasn't piped that way either. So it would be a pretty significant infrastructure project to be able to put water in. I know that the council had discussed that as part of the North Shore Trail project, but those costs just exponentially increase when we're installing a whole new utility, essentially. It is correct that the apartment building and where it leads up with 236th Street Circle North is where the water ends.
Just about to Greenway. No one knows for 236.
Just about to Greenway. Just the road north of Faith Lutheran.
And once you've got umpty squat homes that have sunk $20,000 into a well, they're not gonna support getting water lines in there and paying for water lines.
I would tomorrow, because the water back there on North Shore is full of tannin. And the amount of salt I use in softeners, amazing.
Doesn't have any tannin, but that limestone is full of sulfur and iron. I don't care what I put in that water softener of mine. I've got a yellow bathtub and it's not the way it was put in.
All right. I assume we've had all comment on this project.
I have enough comment to at least share with the developer.
Very good, thank you.
They'll share those comments also with the council. They'll review this as well.
We will start with the updates, and we'll start with the city calendar. In case you didn't make it all the way to your report, I assume that we're covering page 143.
Next month, our meeting times change to 6 o'clock.
At 6 p.m.
Thank you. We have some that start at 5:30, some that start at 6, and I just couldn't remember which we decided, but we're just hopping back an hour. It's not daylight savings.
Just
It's
put it
just
in
gonna be-
really big bold.
we will.
Because some of us are a little slower.
We will, and Dawn is pretty good at, when she sends out her emails, trying to put some of those things in there, but starting next month, at your next meeting, July 9th, which we will have a meeting, will be at 6 o'clock. I do anticipate that we will have our July 9th meeting. It could be possible our second meeting in July is canceled, though. Our first meeting in July, we will be, there's at least one application, if I remember correctly, but we'll be having some discussion, bringing back that landscape ordinance for you folks that Ken and Claire had been working on for some time. Also want to have a discussion about our application procedures. As you just heard tonight, there are just some hiccups sometimes in interpretations of them. Also, just some of our processes and procedures. There's a lot of redundancy, and so how can we make sure that we're doing quality review that's kind of consistent with industry trends and processes and procedures that aren't overly burdensome? And then I'm trying to schedule in an hour for league training, your role in land use decisions. I'm just working out with them if I have to pay individually for each of you when I air it in this room, or if we can only pay for it once. So I just plan to maybe sit and learn, sit and chat some more at our next meeting. We're starting earlier, but I hope to not keep you an hour later.
So along those lines, currently we have a requirement, we have to finish meetings by 11 p.m. We've only ran up to against it once, and I didn't even know that until it was brought to my attention. They go, you know,
Okay.
So now does that back up to 10 PM?
It has not been changed, but I can address that with Jolene and Mark and see if that's a code requirement, a resolution, or what, but,
I don't know, but I was just prompted that.
yeah.
I have to take some off the agenda. I can't remember the meeting, but it went on forever.
Just a few other quick updates. The city did do its, or is in the process of reviewing position, applications for, position was changed from a planning manager to an assistant community development director. We did end up with 11 or 12 applicants, so that was really great. A lot of things came in at kind of a later time period. If you've got a planning background, we know that we're notoriously at the 10th hour sometimes. But we are moving a number of those forward for virtual interviews this week, next week, and then hopefully start to bring some folks in for in-person interviews. I still think, though, that we probably will be well into maybe August before you'll see another new face. So you got me for a while.
Any of them have any planning experience?
Yes, I did. We were able to secure applicants that not only have some with just a few years' experience, but some that have quite a number, almost a decade of experience. And so really excited to talk with all of the kind of those that are advancing on just about their interests and background, and really hoping we can find a good fit for this person's really going to be working hand in hand on a lot of that development review that is anticipated. It would really help all of you and our team internally keep our plates up in the air, because I can't keep spinning them all. So, but I'm doing fine, if you're wondering. And then also I wanted to let you know I'm in discussions with Washington County CDA, the Community Development Agency. They are our housing partner. Washington County CDA has finalized a new repair and renovate loan program that will be eligible for Washington County residents that make up to 115% of the area median income. What makes this really unique is that some of you were here last fall when we talked about our local affordable housing dollars and how we would use those, but how most housing programs really are capped for people who make 85% or less of the area median income. So they've created this kind of a gap program to help offset those that make just slightly higher income, but as we talked about last fall, even 115% of our area median income is still a relatively modest income. So we'll be continuing to work through an agreement with them, bringing that back before you, the EDA, and then ultimately the council will make a decision to finalize the use of our local affordable housing aid dollars, hopefully in partnership with the CDA through at least, if not more, other programs, this new loan program that they have. So I'll keep you guys posted on that.
And is that going to be only for single-family homes, or will it also be applicable to some of our older apartment buildings?
So the 115% program is for the single-family home ownership, but the county does have programs that are geared for more of the lower income rental. And so I am gonna meet with them to just really talk about how we take our big bag of money and make the most use out of it. I think many of us can drive through the community and see that we do have aging rental housing. So I do think that there is some need to inject money into the community for improving our aging rental housing. But the biggest thing that we don't want to do is take our big bag of money and put it all in one project, right? We want to try to spread that out as much as possible. So I think I should have something back for your recommendation to the council I'm hoping in August, because again, I'm still hoping we're going to cancel our second meeting in July, hopefully, but I'll keep you posted on that. Do you have anyone have any questions for me on anything that's been coming through the pipeline or anything?
I have one for you, Abby. Do you know the EDA's got a storefront kind of renovation type
Yeah.
thing, is, you know, OSI is getting a new roof, but it's also got some front on as well as Rolseth.
Yep, both of them.
Were those were part of that?
They were not. So, so the city has, the EDA has always had this program that would give 10% to a commercial storefront project, predominantly downtown, but the EDA expanded it once, and we never saw any applications. So last year I went to the EDA and I said, hey, I think we should just open this program up to everybody non-residential citywide. You know, does it really matter if somebody's plugging money into downtown or the Dollar Tree here? It's improving our tax values, it's improving our image. And the EDA agreed, but the EDA also said 10% isn't a lot. And I said, I agree. So they changed their dollar thresholds. People that inquired in the last like 3 to 6 months, I said, hey, listen, right now if you apply, you're gonna be granted 10%. But if you wait a little bit longer, depending on how much they invest, they can get 25 to 50%, up to $10,000, which it's good money. Both of those projects started before we adopted the new program guidelines, but I am bringing that to the EDA at their next meeting to see if they want to accept those two applications, knowing the original intent for the program was for downtown businesses. These two, I mean, it was just within a matter of like a week of their approval, they had started their projects. And so to grant these two in, I will say since they adopted the program, I have received those 2 inquiries and 2 other complete applications. We've almost hit our EDA's $50,000 this year. So it's a really good program that I think if you know folks that are even doing small jobs, they're painting, if they're changing, you know, a soffit or front windows, any sort of landscaping improvements, those are all things that we'll consider eligible for the program. So essentially the idea is we want to honor and acknowledge and support people who are investing in their properties in the city.
Thank you.
In their non-residential properties, in their commercial industrial properties, I should say that. Caveat that.
Abby, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, we had a project south of 202nd, somewhere Ingersoll sort of area.
Oh, yes.
Where-
Ingersoll Ponds.
No, not the Ingersoll Ponds one, where they've got some really, I don't know what the heck they built. It was a family that was, it was fairly controversial, Paul, you remember it, the neighbors were like, what are you putting in here? Is it a cult? They were putting 5 homes on that ag land where 202nd makes the bend.
I think it was right when I started, I think it was a Nathan project, and I think it was a family, right? It was a number of siblings.
Yeah.
And it was somehow some wonkadoodle minor subdivision, if I remember right, because we probably should have platted it, but we allowed it indifferently.
Well, and we did require,
Teets Farm?
pardon?
Teets Farm?
That sounds about right.
It's the one without the road, right? That we're gonna
Well,
have the
no,
shared driveway.
they had to have, they're coming off of a dirt road, but they had to, within the property, have deeded access to all, in case somebody sold. I thought that they had to do something within a certain number of years. And there's nothing they've done.
No, not, they never even came back with deeds and plats.
Okay.
So, and our,
There's a trailer out there, but
that's a conversation for another day.
I just didn't know if they were moving forward with that at
Our
all.
code does require that you need to submit your deeds or your plats within a certain time frame for your approvals to be eligible. I'm pretty sure that one has exceeded its timeframes. I know it was just being approved when I started, so it's maybe 3 years old now. I'm sure it's gone past the statute of limitations.
I remembered that there was some sort of time limit, and I just wasn't.
We have our esteemed council liaison Larson here. Any tidbits or information you'd like to share with us this evening?
Tidbits, sir. Commissioners, Chairman, Just on Monday's council meeting, we saw the folks that you saw on the two concept plans and went over some of the same things that you folks made recommendations to and are in agreement with those. So we passed on a couple of further things to the gentleman builder off of Clear Lake and also those condos there. So I think they got some pretty good ideas and things will hopefully be moving along. But as you guys had mentioned, the condo thing I think will be a big deal. I think it'll be welcome to the community. They're kind of expensive, but I think it'll work out real well. The other thing I have is myself and Chairman Gerard are going to be interviewing a person tomorrow morning at 9 for the position of Planning Commission. Also, we're interviewing another person on Friday morning at 10 for the Planning Commission. So, two people put in at the same time, so we're gonna interview them both, and if we can't, if one other person doesn't make it, maybe we can invite them maybe to another position within another board, so.
I will say, one of the candidates did write in their application that they happened to be watching the meeting and saw Martin swearing in and thought that it was a good time to serve the community. And so just kind of those small little things that we're doing that people are watching that I think is encouraging, so.
Does the council want to tell us anything about the plans for the 4th celebration here?
We didn't really elaborate too much on that stuff. Most of the stuff is all through the Legion, the parade and stuff like that. One thing that did come to mind is tomorrow they are having a school board meeting. I guess it's quite a contentious deal. So I know the mayor plans on attending as well as possibly the city administrator and or the assistant city administrator. So that's something maybe you might want to take a look at as well.
And tomorrow morning is the chamber
Yes,
city
correct.
leaders thing.
Where's that taking place?
Over at the community, the school district building.
Questions for Jeff?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
All right, final comments, Tim?
None tonight, sir.
Don?
No.
Jesse?
Nope.
Martin?
No, sir.
Chair has no comments, so with that, Chair is looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second, it's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for your contributions this evening.